synchronize my audio. I think we're good. Okay, so rule of thumb, of course, to just look at me when we chat. I would love if you don't mind telling me your name and how to spell it out as well.
Okay.
Go ahead.
My name's Irvin Griniger II, IRVIN, last name GROENINGER.
Okay, and tell me your name and who you are in relation to this story.
My name's Irvin Griniger, and I'm the father of Adam Herrman, or Irvin Griniger III.
So I wanted to hop right to it. About 10 years ago, big news coming your way about your son being missing. How did you hear about it?
I'd gotten a couple of phone calls at the house and from Butler County Investigations, and I'd had no clue what it was. My daughter, his sister, had actually looked me up a few years before, so I thought, well, maybe this is about my son. So when I finally got back in touch with them, they said, well, we're looking for, we're trying to find you for your son. And I'm like, great, he's finally locating me like my daughter did. And they said, no, that's not the case. And I said, well, what's the case? He's got to be 20, 21 years old by now. And they're like, well, he's been missing since May of '99, and it just floored me. So that's how I found out about it.
They just give you a call?
Yeah, they called me. I said, why am I just now finding out about this? And they said, we just found out 2 weeks ago. So it was early December '98 when it first, '08 when it first came out.
What did you think when you got this news and you're like, oh my gosh?
This don't happen to me.
Yeah.
You see this on the news. This don't happen to just Joe somebody. And I didn't know what else to think. All kinds of things went through my head. But I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to do, what I could do. So.
Did they ask you to do anything?
No, they was just trying to see if maybe he was with me.
Yeah. Well, I would assume so.
Yeah.
Try to figure that out.
Because they said that he had been missing since May of '99, and it was never reported, and they had heard that he had ran off. And I said, I haven't seen him since he was a year and a half old.
Yeah.
So.
And through the years, his story, like maybe every year or something, we kind of lightly revive it. But right around then, when news of this broke out, what was it like for you? Were people calling you?
Dr. Phil called me 6 times before I finally agreed to go on Dr. Phil's show.
Oh, wow.
And I only chose to do that so we could get a nationwide view of what he would look like, and that people are interested in finding him. If somebody ran into somebody that looked like me or his age progression photos, they'd be able to step out and do something about trying to help us find him.
But nothing.
No,
Nothing's
nothing.
It's just such a strange case to hear of. And the sheriff, I think, he really wants to figure this out.
Oh yeah, the sheriff and the detectives both, didn't mean to interrupt you. No. The sheriff and the detectives both have been really helpful with doing what they stay in contact with me.
That's good.
Once or twice a year they'll call me and see how I'm doing.
Yeah, that's nice. Sheriff Herzog's a really nice guy, very transparent. If we ever need anything, you won't believe how many times I've emailed him about this case, and I'm like, hey, what can you tell me about this kid or this clue or whatever, and he gets back to me right away.
Now the detectives, the main detective has changed hands, but
Yeah.
they both still stay in contact with me.
Good. I'm so glad to hear that, because I think for me as a parent, you as a parent, it's like, I would just feel so helpless, to not.
Yeah, it's the not knowing that kills you. I have my beliefs of what happened, but I don't have any proof or anything like that. So it's what I try to do to help ease my mind, because I figure he's up there with my dad, so.
So, Irvin,
Mm-hmm.
and your son, Irvin. So is it your dad's name too, I guess?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's cool. I like that. Family name, family tradition.
My dad named me the second, so I could name my son the third if I ever had a son.
Yeah.
So.
And is Irvin or Adam, is he your only boy? Or
Yeah.
How many kids do you have?
I have 3. I have 2 daughters in Irvin.
Okay. And you had them with your ex?
I had a daughter and a son with my ex,
Okay.
and I have a daughter here that's from somebody different.
That's okay. That's great.
Matter of fact, she's getting married in September.
Oh boy, that's exciting. That's really cool. The walk down the aisle.
Yeah, except I'm catering the party for 300 people.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
So you're a cook too.
Barbecue.
That's cool. That's gonna be delicious. We did barbecue for our wedding too. We loved it. So that's awesome.
Yeah, but the father of the bride didn't do it, did he?
Well, we actually all, my family, we all chipped in and cooked something. So we didn't have a caterer or anything.
Right.
So that's okay. I think it's a nice touch, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be cooking for 3 days.
I bet you will be. Do you like smoke meats and stuff or whatever?
Yeah, I got a
Like
big
hand it
smoker.
out?
I'm gonna get a big smoker.
That's awesome. I would love to learn one day, but we have friends, so that's good to know.
None of this is going. It's gonna be
It
cut
won't
out
be
right.
used. I'll cut it out.
It's just like, think of it this way. I got an offset smoker, and I got a firebox here, and then a main smoker.
Yeah.
It's an oven.
Okay.
That's all it is. It's a wood-fired oven.
Yeah,
So
that's cool. Hey, as long as you, I mean, gotta have some good stuff there.
if you can cook in the oven, you can cook on a smoker.
Okay. Well, I mean, to this story, so I wanted to like, one part of the story that I thought was important for my chat with you was talking about like you, I mean, you kind of explained it to me before on the phone, but your ex and you were married, right? Or were you not married?
This is getting into where all the proceedings went on.
It's okay. I
We
just wanna,
we
when I
w-
term it, I want to term it.
we were not married at the time. When we had the children, we were married.
Okay.
But later on, like a year later, during that time, I had came back here.
Right.
She was supposed to
'Cause
follow.
She wanted you to go and get work and all that.
She had nothing there. She didn't know her family was still alive. She had no clue where her parents were.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? I said, let's come back to Indiana. She says, get a house, a job, and a car, and me and the kids will come down.
Yeah.
Okay. So I came down. Within 2 weeks, I had a house, a job, and a car. And next thing you know, 3 months go by, still nothing. Oh, I can't come. I got to pay bills. I said, leave the bills. Just come on down here. We'll start our lives down here. No, it didn't happen. She ended up being with one of my best friends and married him.
Yeah.
So I divorced her, and then I went up to Kansas probably 6 months later, and that's when I had noticed that my daughter had been beat. And then my girlfriend at the time, I told her to call her and tell her, come get the kids. She was babysitting them. Come get the kids. I'll call child protection in the morning.
Yeah.
Now, she called the police. So me and my daughter had to go to the emergency room to do a trauma kit, abuse kit.
Sure.
And they took her from the hospital, and then they came out a couple days later and took the rest of the kids from Jerry.
Was that the last time that you saw the kids?
I seen him one time after that at a supervised visit
Okay.
because they were already in state custody.
And you said they were like, well, Urban was around 1.5, you said around then?
He ran 1.5 year and 9 months maybe.
Okay.
The last time I seen him. He was
How old would you say he's a toddler?
he was a squirt, a little squirt, yeah.
Oh, I'm sure.
And my daughter, she was about 2.5, and she didn't talk much. She had been through a lot, so she was very slow to take off on talking.
With that part of your story, I think that to me is interesting. Like, because you went and you did everything, whatever, in your relationship, but then like later you said you fought for your kids.
Well, it came down to a court case because the kids had gotten taken.
Right.
So, of course, you got to go to court to see what happened, why the abuse happened. They tried at first pinning the abuse on me, and I wasn't even in their lives. So they found out that their mother had been charged with the abuse.
Yeah.
And a little while later, after I got cleared, I came back here. And when I came back here, my lawyer had notified me, okay, everything's done. They're fixing to terminate Jerry's parental rights. Would you like the kids in your home? I said, well, yeah. So he says, you got to get a psychological evaluation, get a home study, and they're going to do a bunch of other things, a bunch of investigations to see what's, if they're fit for me to move in, for them to move in with me.
Sure.
And so I did. I went through all the psychological evaluation, the home study, the background checks, and all that. And they decided I was not mentally capable of taking care of my 2 minor children. And at this time, I was already remarried and raising 3 stepsons that weren't even mine. So the other thing was my house was too small.
Okay.
I didn't make enough money. They wanted me to have bedrooms set up for my daughter and one for my son, with clothes in the drawers, everything ready for them to move in that day, as if they were moving in that day.
Yeah.
And
That's a high expectation.
yeah, when you're working a minimum wage job back then, I couldn't provide that. So then they said, well, we need to talk to the grandparents, which was my dad and my stepmom.
Yeah.
They submitted they submitted one letter to my dad and my stepmom, and said, if you want integration into your home, send us back a certified letter stating you would like them. They sent 2 certified letters, never got a response. Next thing you know, they got put into adoption.
It's pretty fast.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know the timeline, but it was probably 6 months to a year.
Probably felt super duper fast.
Oh,
though.
yeah.
And you're states away.
That's the way I figured it. I figured I was a man 20 years ago, 30 years ago now, maybe. Yeah, about 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I was a man 30 years ago trying to get my kids, and I lived 700 miles away. I was out of their jurisdiction. There was no way I was going to get my kids.
Yeah.
So,
But looking at it now, I mean, to know of all the stuff that happened even after you lost custody of them, I mean, gosh, what does that mean to you? I mean, looking at the state, looking at the system.
looking at the system, I can understand when a child gets abused and they get put into foster care for the court proceedings and everything like that. You know, I understand that. That has to happen. But that foster family lost their foster care license and was able to adopt the kids. The 3 oldest ones got adopted by other people. The rest of them remained in their home, and they adopted all of them. So he was with his half siblings. But and he'd gotten taken a couple times, according to the news.
Yeah, he did.
He got taken a couple of times, and they put him back in that home.
They did, like, there was an incident, so here's one of the incidents that, this blows my mind, talking with Sheriff Herzig. So, there was a time in '95, and the 2 of the biggest incidents that he's noted to me happened within probably months of each other. Back in '95, around Thanksgiving, there were, and I forget how the abuse allegations came out. I'd have to look it up again. But he had your son had several, like, marks on him, scars, some sort of abrasions. I mean, when I say several, like, at least a couple dozen. And so that information came out. They took him out of the home, just him, and they put him into the children's home not too far away in Wichita. The case, oddly enough, when police went to go check things out, they didn't document things very good. They didn't take pictures or whatever. They just wrote the information down, took him to the children's home. It was right around Thanksgiving, so about 1 to 2 days later, he was taken back into the home. I don't know the circumstances of whatever, from what I've read, and I've had to go and get police reports from, this happened down in Derby, and they redacted a lot of information, so they blacked out a lot of information on those reports, but from what I understand, just nothing was, they couldn't say there was abuse, so they returned him back home. And from Sheriff Herzig's perspective, the rush of it all too was, well, it's the holidays, we want to get him back home for the holidays. And to me, you hear about that, and then not long after, the second allegation actually came from his school. And
That's probably why he got put into homeschool.
yeah, actually, about within a month, well, Sheriff Herzig says a week, another thing says about a month. It's probably within a month, but within days of this second abuse allegation, they pulled the kids from the schools and they moved up to Towanda, where they ended up right when he went missing, I guess. And I don't know, they pulled him out of the public schools. The kids were in public schools. He wasn't. He was homeschooled. It just seems very odd.
You know that, and that's why the school didn't miss him.
Yeah.
They showed pictures of him with classes. His optometrist didn't miss him.
Yeah.
Pediatrician didn't miss him.
Like, no one would have to check in on him other
Right.
than the state, but at that point he was adopted, so.
See, that's why I would like to take on the state,
Yeah,
because there ought to be checks and balances.
there should be.
I understand when you adopt a child, that child becomes yours. That is your child, as if you gave birth to that child. But there ought to be twice a year visit or something to where somebody come out, hey, this is aunt so-and-so or cousin so-and-so. They don't have to, the kid don't have to know. If you don't want him to know he's adopted, he don't have to know. But there ought to at least be checks and balances. If that family is drawing a sustenance check, which they were,
A lot of money.
if they were drawing a sustenance check, there ought to be checks and balances to find out how the welfare of that child is. I mean, he was taken from an abusive home. You know, he didn't get abused, but his sister did. He was taken from an abusive home, put into foster care to be better taken care of. And then he was adopted by that foster family to be better taken care of. That's why I decided not to fight the state when they asked me, you know, if it wanted to continue the court proceedings to try to get my kids.
Yeah.
And I told my lawyer, I said, look, just let it go. If I have no chance of winning, let it go so they can get placed in a home and get some structure in their life.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it would have kept them in the foster care system, kept them in the children's home system, and it could have been years before they finally got placed somewhere.
And then they get placed with the Hermans.
So I just decided, you know, just let it go, let them get some structure, let them get some concrete under their feet, you know.
Yeah.
I did what I thought was best for the kids
Sure.
by stepping back.
Well, and I think anyone would think that. I mean, you would hope that at least, for sure. It's just to me, I feel, and I don't know how about you in this case, but you know, talking with other people, I've talked with like a classmate of his, I talked to the sheriff, a lot of other people kind of behind the scenes, and I think the one conclusion from everybody is that the system really failed her son.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's still going on. I'm sure there's other families that are getting just as screwed by the state as I did.
Sure.
And I never really felt that I was being screwed by the state back then. Now that all this has happened, I'm like, I should have tried harder. I just didn't have the funds or the, you know, the
You're young
ability.
too,
Yeah,
so,
I was in my 20s. I had no clue. I didn't know what to do. And there was nobody I could talk to say, hey, what should I do? Nobody was on my side but my parents.
I am trying so hard with these cases. So I do these missing persons reports, and a lot of them are kids. I do them every day at our station. And
I've seen that.
It's hard, you know. I think it's so hard for a lot of families to go through this because you are not alone.
Right.
I mean, this case is a very unusual one for sure. But I mean,
I even contacted Cold Case.
you did.
The show, I emailed them. I never got a response, but I emailed them. And not long after that, the $50,000 reward went to $100,000. And I figured they might have done that to try to get somebody kicking up some information, but nothing ever happened with it.
What do you, I mean, like, have you ever, like, gone back to Kansas since everything surfaced?
Yeah, I went back one time and visited with Sheriff Craig Murphy
Okay.
and Detective Jay Sharp, who is the former detective. He's no longer on the case, but I met with them for the first time, and Mike from KWCH interviewed me, and I was out there for that.
Yeah.
And he took me around and showed me everything, and
Yeah.
that's the only time I've been out there since.
Yeah. I'm a little Tawanda, Kansas, not a very big town.
Yeah.
And so, but I think it's nice to at least have chatted with him, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, and it's like I wanted some clarity. I told him, I said, in the event we do find him, I said, I want to bring him home. I want to bring his, you know, if all we find is a sack of bones, I want to bring him here and bury him here. This is where he should have been. But he said, I don't know if you can do that. I said, well, I'll at least like to try if in the event that that's what happens. Because I know in my heart that's probably what's going on. He's probably up there with my dad. They're probably sitting up there drinking a beer right now. You know,
I hope so. I hope so.
he'll be 31 next month.
I know. He's just a little bit younger than me, so when everything with him, I was like,
Yeah.
oh gosh, I'm like, you know, I look at this and it pains me, and it pains me to think of everything that happened, because, I mean, I know you've probably read so much, you're probably shown so much once, and probably things, people probably just threw it at you and just be like, did you know this happened? And be like, oh my gosh.
Oh, when I read the newspaper reports about how they abused him, when I seen
Locking him up. in like a bath?
Chaining him to the bathtub.
Like who does that?
And when I got on the Dr. Phil show, there was 2 women sitting on stage. My ex-wife, who I knew,
Yeah.
and some other woman I had no clue, and I was sitting between the 2.
Sure.
And when her little spiel came up, because we did a lead in,
Yeah.
when her little spiel came up, and I found out that she had witnessed that he was chained up to a bathtub for 3 or 4 days,
Yeah.
and never said or did anything about it. I'm like, are you kidding me? I wanted to knock her off stage.
Sure.
How do you do that? You know, if I would have walked in on something like that, first thing I would have done was walk outside and call the cops. Hey, this child's being abused.
And he wasn't, or she wasn't the only person. There were lots of family that have come forward after saying, yeah, we know he was abused or locked up or whatever. And I'm like, why? Why would you not do anything?
Their son or their son-in-law, one of the 2, had went in, I guess they were living somewhere where they had a basement, had went into a basement. He was chained up in the basement in a dark corner and asked for help, and they didn't help him.
I just don't get that. They have all these kids, and then why do they pick on him? Like, I don't get it at all.
I don't know.
I mean, like, and I know, I mean, kids are difficult, you know.
Especially at 10,
you know,
11 years
whatever,
old.
And that's fine. Like, that is expected. But I just don't know why. Like, they chose him to,
I don't know.
whatever. It just
And out of all
mind-boggling.
the kids, he was the only one that had his name changed.
Yeah, I don't understand that either.
I don't get. I mean, surely, you know, my name is a family name
Yeah.
because he was Urban III, but he was the only child that changed his name. All the rest of them retained their first name. You know, I'm sure they became Hermans,
Sure.
but they retained their first name. Whereas my son, they changed his name to Adam instead of Irvin. I don't know. I don't get it.
I don't get anything with this. Have you ever tried to contact the Hermans or anything?
No.
Anything like that?
No.
I know, like, I forget, Doug. I guess he passed
Yeah.
away some years
Yeah.
ago. And that's been an interesting twist. I was talking to Sheriff Herzog about that. Like, do you think anything will change or whatever with this case? And, you know, I mean, he's kind of on the fence about it. He's like, well, it could, you know, maybe someone will come forward now. Maybe they aren't as scared because something or whatever.
Back in 09 or 010, I had talked to the prosecutor.
Yeah.
There was a different prosecutor than there is now.
Yeah.
But I'd talked to the prosecutor and I said, why ain't you questioning them about his disappearance? Well, we're questioning him about the money.
Okay. Yeah.
And I said, well, why aren't you questioning him about his disappearance, about where he's at? Well, because it's not related. I'm like, how's it not related?
That's strange.
They wouldn't be in trouble for the money if it wouldn't be for him being gone.
Yeah.
You know, and they drew checks for, what, 7 years?
Yeah, I was looking it up. I mean, it was tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah,
They
and
only pegged them on like a fraction of that because they
1 year. They could only get after him for 1 year
Yeah.
because statute of limitations.
Yeah.
And so he
But it
did.
was a lot of money.
So Doug did 9 months and Valerie did 6 months.
Right.
And that was all over and said and done with. And, you know, I figured it would have been a federal case because they claimed him on their taxes.
Sure. Sure.
You should have, you know, I don't get it.
I don't get any of it. The one thing that I am like, I mean, that I am glad that happened though, even though a lot of people didn't speak up for him, like what is it, the Herman's biological daughter, Crystal?
Yeah,
maybe?
yeah, Crystal.
For her to come forward and at least say, I mean, she wasn't like, she didn't upfront, I mean,
Well,
I think she knew stuff.
Their son did too, but Crystal's the one that reported it.
Yeah, she when she figured out, because I think she got a contact with a friend within the state or something. She found out like they were lying about Irvin, and once she realized that, she had contacted them and said, no, that's not true. You know, he's not living with them like you guys say, and then they launched the investigation. But I'm so grateful that at least she kind of was like, that's not right.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know if she had planned for.
Even though it was going against her parents, she had the gall to stand up and say, hey, this ain't right.
Yeah.
You know, finally.
Yeah.
Otherwise, nobody'd ever even know about
We
it.
would never know even now. That's the thing. And that's the part that really scares me, is that there are so many kids out there that some huge moment 10 years ago when she went and at least asked
Yeah.
questions. But I'm just like, gosh, I pray so much now that someone out there who knows, because someone knows, and Sheriff Person says that he's like, it's likely within the family they know, and he's like, I'm just hoping to learn, but I'm hoping that by sharing it, maybe someone else.
That's the only reason
knows
why I
or
still do these
someone-
interviews.
I know.
Is
And I hate to even put you in this position to be like whatever, but these cases, I mean, and the system too, because I plan on doing a couple stories. One, just a refresher on the case, and the other one talking about the system and how much it sucks, because
Yeah.
it does. I mean, the case with him and his abuse, I mean, it kind of mirrors all these other cases that are popping out in Wichita now. There was a kid who, just at 3 years old, parents fighting over custody, the mom had custody of the kid, her boyfriend and her boyfriend actually was the one who did the abuse, like they like chained him, and he's like 3 or something. They chained him, they'd make him walk on Legos and do whatever, but they beat him, they videotaped it, and all this stuff. And they ended up, they killed him. And they put him in like concrete or something, and like somehow like a landlord or someone smelt something with it or whatever, and I just whatever, and they eventually found out that they killed him. And that's a DCF kid. And I mean, yeah, your kid was out of DCF or out of whatever it was termed then, by the time he was adopted and when all this abuse was happening. And that's kind of the hard part for me. I'm trying to get all this information, and the part that kind of makes me mad, like Derby police, where a chunk of the abuse happened with him. So I went and contacted the police chief, and he's pretty nice guy. And I said, hey, I wanted to get some information on this case. It's old, but it's certainly one you're familiar with. He's like, yeah. And I had to pay a couple $100 to get the documents for this. 7 pages and half of it's blacked out. And it blows my mind. Like, they're like, well, we blacked out parts to protect people. And I'm like, I understand that. But I'm like, why do we have to? I'm like, it blows my mind that they made us pay a couple $100.
I know, right?
For paperwork that I'm like, you should be giving this to us and asking for the community to
For help, yeah.
Like, why are you I mean, granted, yeah, we're taking some of your staff's time, I get that, but I'm like, is it really that difficult? But they had their lawyers go over everything too to make sure, like, they weren't in a bind. Because honestly, Derby police was kind of the start of the failures, I feel. Like, I mean, granted, they shouldn't have been able to adopt anyone.
No.
Because of
They lost their foster care license.
Yeah. But the police failed because of the follow-up and the follow-through. And I think once you already have an abuse allegation, and granted they didn't find them like evidence or proof of anything, I'm like, but you get accused of it again, I'm like, you would look, I think, a
Red
little
flags.
further. Yeah. And then the moving, where was the follow-through on that? Like, they moved like not long after.
Like I said, there's no checks and balances.
It's scary.
They were the adoptive parents. It was as if they gave birth to the children.
Yeah.
There's no checks and balances at all.
So.
And then they moved out of the jurisdiction. Then they moved out of the state's jurisdiction. So.
Yeah. It's freaky is what it is. And I don't know.
Talking about going for paperwork, I did go out to Kansas in 05.
Okay.
I believe it was 05, 04 or 05, fall of 04, I believe. Mm-hmm. And that was just like a year after, or 2 years after Tiffany had found me, my daughter Tiffany.
Yeah.
And I went to the courthouse in Sedgwick County and got copies of the court proceedings because I didn't have any copies of all that anymore. But I went and got copies of the court proceedings, paperwork, to prove to her, hey, look, I didn't abuse you. It was your mother, it wasn't me.
Yeah.
Because she had a lot of hatred for me for a while. She looked me up, but she still had a little deep set hatred. She calls me all the time now.
That's nice.
And she's gonna be my other daughter's wedding too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's really sweet.
They've became pretty good sisters.
That's cool. That's nice to hear.
Yeah.
Just a lot of pain.
Yeah.
I don't know what's what with anything here, but I just, like I said, I'm hoping to
I hope something comes out of it.
Whenever his story is shared, I mean, it gets so much. I mean, people know it. Like people. I don't think I'm gonna be coming back anytime soon.
No, but I appreciate you driving all the way out here for this.
I mean, it's not a big deal. What do you like? Is there anything that you hope from here on out? Like, I mean, obviously we want to find him.
Yeah, I want some closure. I mean, I haven't seen him since he was 1.5 years old. He got taken from me. I wasn't allowed to get my children. But being his biological father, it just murders me not knowing whether he is out there kicking it somewhere or if he's been gone since 99. I'd love to know. As any parent would want to know, because it's murder. Waking up every morning, seeing his picture beside my bed, the last picture I ever had of him. So I'd love to know what happened.
Well, I hope we find out.
Yeah, I do too.
And you have a picture you said you brought here?
The only picture I have of him.
When was that taken?
Oh, good Lord. He was a year.
You're just a kid too.
He was a year and a half old. I can't remember what year it was.
I'm gonna have you. Do you mind just tilting it down just a little? There we go. That's perfect. It's cute though.
And we both have that goofy smile.
But he has your eyes, you know?
Yeah.
It's incredible. So around then, so you were living in Wichita then? Or where were you living when you guys were together, I guess?
Oh, we was living in Kansas. I live in Wichita. You done with this?
Testing your arm strength here. Reaching out to her, but I didn't want to put anyone in an uncomfortable spot, because certainly it's super sensitive. And even the sheriff said, there's some days that she'll call us and she loves us, and some days she doesn't. And I'm like, well, I understand, because it's gotta be like hard. But I mailed her a letter. I mailed Valerie a letter. I sent Valerie a note or two on Facebook, but it's just,
You'll never hear from Valerie.
I know. The sheriff said that she was in a relationship with some younger guy, and I don't even know how they found out this, but he didn't know anything about her past or anything, but then he looked her up on the internet, and he found all these just crazy, like, oh my gosh, what did I get into? And of course the relationship didn't last, but I'm like, wow.
Yeah. Well, that's like before all this, you'd Google search my name, it'd come up with 4 or 5 hits maybe.
Yeah.
Now there's like 1,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, it explodes.
It's interesting.
That's going to kill this.